Hello, creative spirits. Welcome to another episode of Your Creative and Magical Life. I'm your host, Cecily Saylor, and today we are jumping ahead a card, and you'll understand why very soon. But we've been moving through the major arcana cards one by one in order, and our last conversation focused on the Justice card. And so this episode was scheduled to talk about the Hanged One. And I do have a really fantastic interview about the Hanged One recorded with a really fantastic guest. And I'm very excited to share it with you in just a little bit more time. But then I had this conversation about the Death card and some surprise circumstances that came up around this conversation made it feel a lot more urgent and immediate. And so I wanted to share it with you as soon as I could. And to explore this card, I reached out to Mara June Pfeffer, who is a death doula, an educator and facilitator, a grief alchemist, a community herbalist. Mara has a passion for plant magic, storytelling, art making, shape shifting, and dreaming together. I've been following Mara on Instagram for I don't know how long, for a long time. Their account on Instagram is Motherwort and Rose, which refers to two plants that are really supportive to humans in times of grief. And on Motherwort and Rose, Mara June shares beautiful images, poetic words. There's a lot of emphasis on how we can be with our grief, how we can make space for our grief, how we can turn to the non-human world when we're grieving, and how we can make sense of our relationship with death so that it can affirm us in our lives. And I was really excited when Mara said yes to come on the podcast. I didn't know Mara personally before we had this conversation, but was really grateful they said yes to coming on the show. And we set up our interview. And then Hurricane Helene happened just about 2 weeks ago now. It moved up the Gulf Coast and up through the South in the US and brought a lot of damage and flooding and heavy winds to parts of Appalachia that have never experienced hurricane type storms in the past that we know about. And I didn't realize it at the time, but Mara lives in Asheville, one of the cities that was nearly devastated by this hurricane. Asheville has suffered a lot of damage. Many other towns in the area have also suffered unbelievable amounts of damage. The folks in these areas will have a long road ahead, putting their lives back together and finding a new sense of normalcy. And so when I realized that Mara June had been through this hurricane, I thought, there's no way we're going to have a podcast interview in 4 days. And I reached out to check on them and to see if they wanted to reschedule. But Mara June said it was important to have this conversation. So they were able to go to the Whole Foods parking lot in downtown Asheville and talk on their phone. And I recorded the conversation that way. And as this episode is coming out, another gigantic, even bigger, more powerful hurricane is moving over the coast of Florida. And these kinds of events are becoming more common. They're becoming more intense. They are fueled by climate change, which is caused by human consumption of fossil fuels. We're at a moment of incredible choice and opportunity as a collective humanity to change how we consume and relate to what our lives look like. And the change needs to happen soon, and it needs to happen fast, or every one of us at some point will be living through disasters like this. And even if we're not living through the disaster right now, I think it's heavy and difficult to look around at our community, our society, and see that huge numbers of people, entire towns, cities, counties, and states are suffering and going without resources and housing and really struggling and losing everything they've worked really hard for because our weather is going to continue to intensify like this. It's going to be harder to live on this planet, and that's just our new reality unless we collectively come together to do something about that. So, I wanted to share this episode now. We'll go ahead and get into it. Thanks for listening, and I hope this episode serves you well. It's certainly about much more than climate change. It's also about community. It's about our own individual relationships with death and how we face our grief. So I know we've all experienced grief in that way, or we will before too long because it is just a part of life. So I hope there's something in this episode that feels gentle and comforting to your heart and that helps light your path going forward. I want to thank you for coming on this call. I know it's only been really a week since the hurricane moved through your area, causing tremendous flooding and damage. And we had this call scheduled today a while back before the storm came. And, you know, when I realized you were in the path of the storm earlier this week, I reached out just to make, you know, did you want to postpone? Did you want to like definitely reschedule? But you said like it felt like an important time to have this conversation. And so I just really appreciate you wanting to speak with me and share your stories with others out there. And I thought maybe we could just start with the present moment and where you are and how you are today and what you're seeing and feeling.
Thank you so much for having me and for all of your care and reaching out and communicating with me and allowing me to be in the moment that I'm in. As part of this conversation, it feels like maybe I've been so grateful for every invitation to be on a podcast, but this feels like perhaps one of the more like just real, like human to human kind of experiences, how I'm getting invited to be here with you. So thank you. And where I am right now in West Asheville, I'm actually in downtown Asheville at the moment, just parked in front of a Whole Foods where there's some Wi-Fi and some signal. And it's been like this last week has just been like time just feels completely altered. I'm like, it's been a week. Wow. It feels both like a lot longer and a lot shorter, and like time is doing an interesting dilating thing that it does in, I think, in times of big grief and in disorienting times in general. And I think, today, in this moment, how I'm feeling, I think I'm both feeling very tired, very exhausted, a mixture of like hopeful and inspired and moved by all of the community efforts that I'm seeing and witnessing here to take care of each other. I'm also feeling disoriented and just also noticing how like in how crucial community is, like how also all of us show up imperfectly to it, and like with all of our baggage, and like, you know, I think in times like these, like we're also really aware of how life and death community is. And so like just just in that flow of like noticing like how we're all navigating this these activating times together with all of our heartbreak, and some of us, yeah, just like navigating feelings of belonging and activation around that. There's people who are leaving and able to access, you know, more resources and distribute them. There's folks who, you know, are making decisions that it's better to evacuate. There's just a lot up around community and grief and home. And I think for me today, I'm just feeling that, like swimming in that, and really grateful to get a space to like reflect on what's happening here and connect with someone who's not here. Yeah, it feels like a gift. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a gift to me as well, and I'm sure many people who will be listening. And it doesn't surprise me, of course, that you mention community in this moment. And I know community is a big part of what has been your work around death and grief and supporting people through their own experiences with death, with grief. You have like grief circles, you host a lot of gatherings and hold containers for people to be in community to process their grief. And, you know, I know on that end, there's the kind of like intentional construction. I'm sure there's also like a very organic construction to that. And I imagine where you are in the moment and seeing the community, your community come together in ways that you probably have not quite seen before. I guess I'm curious what connections you're making between the way you have been working and kind of this more freewheeling like application of community coming together, if that even makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really incredible. Like, you know, obviously there's some areas where I can only really speak to where I am, I suppose, because there's lots of places where folks are not able to access even the resources we have in West Asheville and, yeah, downtown. But like walking down Haywood, which is one of the closest like main roads to where I live, it's amazing. It's like every block there's a different mutual aid group set up that has, you know, resources to distribute. Is, yeah, Firestorm Co-op folks there are doing such incredible, beautiful work. I like stopped by yesterday and just saw like all the notes they've been taking on, like, you know, kind of just getting a, you know, getting information about what needs are being met, what needs aren't being met from different parts of town and around the region, seeing what resources we have and how they can be shared. It's extremely inspiring just to like see the vast amount of people who care about one another and capacity to be in it together, and desire to share resources. It's incredible. So I feel like, yeah, like I guess like some of the ways that this moment feels maybe different from some of the work that I've been doing is like the link between, I guess, one, it's like my online work has been, you know, disrupted, and my in-person work is like, you know, the ongoing invitation is like how to join up with others here. And it also feels like I am, I can definitely see a role of like, you know, hosting grief circles and things like that, but I also see very much like the way that grief is being held in the everyday, day-to-day work of caring for each other, and like the mutual aid work happening, and like the ways that folks with access to different healing modalities are like sharing those as resources. And yeah, and like, sharing herbal medicines for nervous system support and first aid, and just seeing like the grief and everyday care kind of like woven together in these mutual aid efforts that are happening. And also just like even in, navigating within like my friend group, at our house, like our morning and evening meetings and our check-ins, and seeing how each other are really doing. Like there's tears, there's songs, there's like space for the like nitty gritty, like, okay, we got to get water. Where are we getting water? Where are we getting fuel? Who's doing this chore? But then there's also like, and how are you? Like, how do we co-regulate? What feels regulating for you right now? Like, it's really incredible to see the ways that we're weaving these conversations of care together. And I think it is, yeah, it's really powerful to see that that's like, that's not something that like grief workers are necessarily at the forefront of. I mean, I'm sure that folks are doing it. It's also just seems like something that many folks are doing together, which is so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, that is really profound, I think. And, like when so much gets stripped away and, obviously like the destruction to the infrastructure in your area is very difficult and like logistically, practically extremely problematic. But it's like when, people can't sort of go to work in the way that they used to, and, food and water and comfort become more immediate concerns. Like it just really shows that what we have is each other, and that's like where we turn to first, and I think we don't get the opportunity to appreciate that in the way that our world is constructed. And I'm curious if you're willing to share a little bit more just about like who comes around and like who's gathering with you, and is that, you said friends, is it also like neighbors, and is there anything surprising about like who's part of that circle or how that's going?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So, I live in like a house with 5 other people, and so it's been like, our house has kind of been a hub for us and those we are closest with, at least at first and for now. And so this is like, our chosen family. But then like a lot of what we've been doing is, and what our neighbors have been doing too, is like checking in with each other. I feel like there are neighbors who had never been inside their house before, and now, we're going over regularly. We're like sharing what we have. We're checking in, like we're, you know, using our rainwater to flush neighbors' toilets. We're like, folks are sharing their food with us. We're, like sharing in childcare, and like our neighbors across the street who we didn't really know super well before this are like, their kids are going to come over later and do art on our front porch. There's like, you know, our neighbor with a newborn baby, like ask for support, and folks are going to go over there and give her and her partner a break. There's just like, I think the ways that we, even those of us who are deeply invested in, community, like can go about our day-to-day lives not knowing the people closest to us in our neighborhoods. Like, and this just like cracks that open. Like, it's like, oh no, like actually we all really need each other, and we need to like expand how we're thinking about us, like, yes, we have an opportunity, or yes, we have to think about, how do we get enough water for our household, but we also get to like expand how we're thinking about our household, and we get to expand how we're thinking about who is within our sphere of care. And it's been really beautiful to get to know the people around us better, and to see like everyone turning towards each other in that way.
Yeah. Thank you. It is really beautiful just to listen. It's bringing tears to my eyes. And I don't know if this is an important question or I just leave it to you if it feels like meaningful to share about it, but is there anything you want to share about your experience as the storm was going through? Is that
Mhm.
something you want to
Yeah.
express or not dwell on at the moment, maybe?
Mm. Thank you. Yeah, I think I I'm struck by, I think my experience was like, it's how to my experience, I think, was one very much of like at first like, oh, there's going to be a big storm. Okay, they're telling us to prepare. We've heard this before. It hasn't been so bad. Even as someone who's like, I feel like in the same way been very much aware of climate chaos and like with the knowledge that we are all going to be impacted. It's only a matter of when. Um, I I did not, and the people that I am closest with did not feel in any sense like we understood what was coming. Um, and so I feel like the night of, uh, we had like gotten a little extra water. We had like gotten, you know, we like created a group thread for all our friends to be able to like share how things were going if we lost power. Um, and yeah, it didn't really hit, like the fear didn't really set in until like the middle of the night. I woke up and I knew that the peak of the storm was supposed to be around like 8 a.m. our
Mm.
time. And I just remember seeing the trees outside of our window, the way that they were moving hours from when I knew the peak of the storm was going to hit was like terrifying. And I just like, in thinking about death and thinking about the death tarot card, like one thing I was reflecting on is like it felt like death was in the room. Like I felt
Mm.
the like fear. Like I felt like, wow, I have actually no idea. This storm is going to be deadly for some. It could be me. It could be people I love. Like I don't know. And like that, it didn't really hit me until then. And then in the morning, like we had no signal, no Wi-Fi, no like the group thread that we had been using to contact each other, like none of us could access it. And my partner lives one of my partners lives out in a holler in Leicester, which turned out to be fairly safe and everyone is okay out there. But we didn't know,
Mm.
for hours in the morning, and lots of folks still now like don't know. There's families who have and loved ones who haven't been able to like hear and reach from each other, reach out and be able to reach each other. But yeah, that was really terrifying for me. I think the realizing that we were okay in my house in the morning and had like survived the most intense part of the storm, and our neighborhood seemed okay, even though just like a 5 minutes walk away, the French Broad River had um, devastated those at lower elevation than us. We were just sort of like up on a hill, but yeah, those hours of like not knowing how everyone else was that we already had been trying to communicate with through the storm were like extremely terrifying. And it still feels like anytime I, see even an acquaintance who I hadn't yet like connected with or heard from, like the way that we greet each other is like, yeah, holy fuck, you survived, and like holding each other in that way. Um, so it's, yeah. And I think just being in the like, so that was my experience of this, the most like acute part of the storm. And then since then, it's just been like, wow, okay, like we don't know how long we'll be in this situation where folks are still in active search and rescue in parts of the state, and we don't know about when we'll have running water or power or internet or access to medicine, or and there are places that folks are being able to refill some of their prescriptions and things, but everything feels like very emergent, and not in like uh emergency, I guess, but what I mean is like we are finding things out as we go. And yeah, it both feels clarifying and beautiful and grief filled and joy filled in the times of connection and celebrating like the communities we have and the care that we have. And it feels also grounding to be in it with each other and like be reminded of what really matters. And it also feels in this moment, I wouldn't say that I feel relieved. I have in moments felt a relief of kind of like, okay, we're in the thing we feared most. Like now we're in it. And it's like there's been many communities who have been impacted for a long time. And there's been a way that like death has been kind of made into this like spectacle that we just like watch from our screens when it's not directly impacting us. And to be here with a climate catastrophe like experience that so many of us have like expected at some point in our lives to happen but not know when it would impact us, it's like, okay, in some sense we've arrived. Like this, of course things could always get worse, but it's like we are now in the worst case scenario, so how do we want to be in it together? And that feels like similar to death care work for me, in the sense it's like getting ourselves to ask those questions with a real appreciation for the preciousness of life, and like a real like undeniability of the presence of death.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like, that's sort of the paradox in a way, is like how much clarification sometimes like losses can bring, and or like awakening or awareness or this reconnection to what's most dear to us. And I know that that's something like you teach and help people connect with all the time. And I think, this is this is all set up to be a conversation about the death card, and it seems only appropriate, I suppose, that we acknowledge the death of people in your community. And of course, I'm many hundreds of miles away, and I only know a couple people in Asheville. I have been wanting to go to Asheville for a long time because they kind of say it's a little like Austin, and but I hadn't made it yet. And just thinking about like how much the town will change as well. But is there anything, I don't know, what feels right and honoring and important in the moment as a way to honor the people who did not survive, or the members of the community that are missing or won't be coming back?
Well, yeah, maybe we can, one thing is like maybe we can just like take some breaths together, and if people who are listening feel like they're in a place to do that, just sort of like acknowledging, that there are many who have not survived these different catastrophes, this ongoing current one here, and both the loss of human and more than human life, and the destruction of waterways and land and the pollution that happens because of these catastrophes, just like holding so much love for each other and those who did not survive and the land that will continue to be impacted, and those and all of us who, right, we're inseparable from these ecosystems. um just taking some breaths to really like honor any grief welling up, any care welling up, even folks like feeling numbness or an inability to really absorb or be with this level of grief, but also taking some breaths with that if that's you.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think then noticing like, is there any small way that small action that folks might take out there to feel engaged and not helpless in it, in the watching of what's happening from afar, or to feel like the ways that we are bound up together in our thriving and in our surviving. And yeah, I would invite folks to, donate if you can to a mutual aid fund. There's so many here, folks on the ground that are just like already in it, the active distribution of resources and keeping people alive. And I can list some of those, but also just like, I think, it's easy to feel like when something really devastating is happening somewhere else, a kind of like helplessness. And I would just like both like welcome that as it comes, and also like remind folks that there are small ways we each have agency, and invite folks to find those small places that we do and to lean in there. I think there's like a real magic that happens when we both feel our grief or feel what is coming up for us, when we hold those who did not survive in our hearts, and then also think about all those who are still living, and how we might like lean in and support them, just even small ways. And also, I think just like sensing our bound upness. Like I saw a post the other day from organizers of Many Lands Mutual Aid in Palestine, who folks in Asheville have been doing fundraising efforts with pre-storm. I saw them post a prayer for us in Asheville, and it's just like so powerful to be like, wow, yeah, I felt like we were in solidarity, and now that I'm like in this, specific situation, like you can feel the bound upness like even more. And so just like inviting folks to feel that, like, I don't know, I feel like it's so easy to not somehow, that there's all these ways we've been conditioned to not feel like what we, do to there's this quote from Cleveland Alley, that is, what we do to the mountains, we do to ourselves, like there's just a lot of ways to dissociate from that reality. And it's super real, and I think like sometimes the way out of that dissociation is like smaller than we think. Like a little action, can do a whole lot. So yeah, I would just invite folks to like support mutual aid efforts where you are now. Those will be the folks on the front lines probably when shit does hit the fan, where you are, to get to know your neighbors, to tell people you love them, to like send a little mutual aid this way if you can. Yeah, and to just like, yeah, to be with the waves as they come. I think like giving ourselves permission to feel and giving ourselves permission to be disoriented, and be in and out of the like numbness and overwhelm and joy and at our like capacity for being together. Like it's all here. My partner said the other day at our meeting, like, this is life, and this is what it is to like be in it together. I absolutely do feel also held by like knowing like that there are folks out in the world who are like praying, casting spells, sitting at their altars, lighting candles for each other, and like channeling care, and reconnecting with their own capacity to care, is like so beautiful and powerful. And I think sometimes like it can feel like that feels small or minimal. And I think it's, for those who resonate with those practices, I think it's crucial. And, like there's ways that we're trying to create space for rest and nourishment and presence, and to not just be in the urgency of things, too. And that's all really, really needed. I always come back to Bayo Akomolafe's work in so many ways, but really feeling the way he talks about urgency, and he says like the times are urgent, we must slow down, and talks about slowing down as a kind of, it doesn't necessarily mean we aren't responsive, but we're moving differently in the world, ideally like more attuned to ourselves and one another, and that like always operating out of this like crisis mentality isn't necessarily gonna get us out of the crisis.
If it's okay, I want to read a little bit from your latest post on Substack, and maybe talk for just a moment longer about climate change and climate grief. And then maybe we'll talk about the death card after that. Are you doing okay? How are you feeling? Do you have energy for a little more conversation?
Yeah, no, I definitely have energy. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so you wrote this really beautiful piece, and you start with a quote from Rebecca Solnit. If paradise now arises in hell, it's because in the suspension of the usual order and the failure of most systems, we are free to live and act another way. And that comes from her piece, A Paradise in Hell, the Extraordinary Communities That Arise in Disaster. And then you go on to write, this is, I believe a few days after the storm, I'm feeling how within the terror of climate catastrophe, there is a vast and deep well to draw from, a capacity to magic and care for one another, to truly come alive as we are forced to find ways to be in it together, to meet our basic needs and those of our neighbors. I've been remembering on deeper and deeper levels how being with death and the precarity of life can, while terrifying, truly invite us to live. When we have nothing left but each other and our wild dreaming, we can finally cast aside that which keeps us tethered to oppressive systems. Their grasp loosens. We get to choose something else. Once we are in hell, we can finally look our fear in the face. We can also see ourselves and one another a bit more clearly, see who else is down here, who's been down here without the illusion of safety or anything guaranteed. What is it we were so afraid of? What stories did they tell us about the underworld and one another and why we should fear each other? These systems that told us we'd die without them are the ones perpetuating death. We are the ones who will take care of each other. So that was just incredibly beautiful and incredibly moving and powerful. And, maybe this can be a little bridge into is such a big topic. It's like I'm thinking about sort of the death cult nature of our society and our economy. I'm also thinking about how those systems have divorced us from meaningful death practices in our lives. And then I'm thinking about, that same, both like the fear of what will come with climate change and also, the sadness that I think some of us can truly name because we're cultivating like an active, relationship with the non-human world. But I think some people who don't even necessarily think in those terms may also feel this sadness and not know exactly what it is. But I guess in the aftermath of this storm, and as someone who has been thinking about climate change for a while and working so closely with nature, you're also an herbalist and you work with plants as medicine and you work with plants specifically as medicine around grief and death. But I don't know, what's feeling important for you to like, maybe what's feeling alive and important for you internally, or what feels important to share about that, even though that's really just a super open-ended question.
Well, it's great. I'm gonna just like take a moment to kind of orient and see what wants to come through. It's it's also very helpful, I think, for those of us who do have practices like writing. I'm like, oh yeah, like this, it is helpful to go back and like hear it re-articulated in moments when I'm feeling less articulate. I'm like, yes, that is what I feel. And also, I mean, I think, let me see where to start. I'm gonna have to edit this part a bit because it feels a little scattered for me, but
I think I laid it down in a scattered way.
Yeah.
So
no, it's great. Okay. I did write some notes on this, if it's okay. I just want to kind of pull them up.
Oh yeah. Take your time.
That helps me. But I would generally say, yes, I love coming back to Rebecca Solnit's work and not just, and all of the folks who have been talking about this, I think. Just this kind of like, I think the death card, I think being with death, I think death care work, grief work, they all invite us to be a little less avoidant of our fear, to kind of like look at what's actually happening, be with death, be with our experience, like the parts of our experience that we might be avoidant of. And I think that we have a real spectacle of death today for with like and a real reality of like there being lots of death. And so we have like, an ongoing pandemic, multiple ongoing genocides. And I think that we see the way that states and those in power have really failed us in how to be with this death meaningfully. I think we see a kind of often, a kind of armed lifeboat mentality against climate change instead of a real banding, a real community empowerment. It seems like, a lot of my research, like before I left my PhD program, was on the United States response to a lot of the climate research that came out was to take it seriously, mostly in the direction of homeland security and militarism and borders, and not really in the like acknowledging that the ways that we are living in the West are causing, driving these climate catastrophes, and how can we be less dependent on these industries that are causing these crises. Instead, it's been a kind of doubling down on and a militaristic response. And I I think you can compare that to like just or I think that's really connected to how we are with death. Like you can clamp down, you can kind of like be in this mindset for example, like I guess what I'm interested in is like how are we relating with death and our own mortality and like what matters most to us? Like how do we want to live? Do you want to like barricade your doors and hoard your water bottles, suspicious of everyone around you? Um, or like, or do you want to really like acknowledge how crucial we are to one another's survival and like function more as an organism and experiment in that and like see what it might be like if we weren't so steeped in ideologies of like individualism. And I kind of see like being with death and catastrophe climate chaos as like an opportunity to disrupt that individualism and that like armed lifeboat kind of mentality and that like clamping down and instead to see as these like systems fail us, like it is the communities who it's us, like we will show up together and that like yes our communities are not utopias but it is like we do have these capacities, like there is a way that Rebecca Solnit speaks about like what if our capacity to care for each other is actually like a default and not
Right.
it's like a muscle that we have. And that's what I'm seeing here, amidst all the grief and activation and trauma. There is a very deep capacity that almost feels like this is what the human organism can do. Like this is how we can function, like seeing the way that folks can come together to redistribute information and resources and care to where it's most needed and to continue to seek out the most vulnerable communities even when we don't have access to that information via internet easily. And it's like requiring people like literally gathering and sharing that information and going out and seeking that information. It's so beautiful and powerful. And yeah, I guess just to say like I think, you know, again, what I'm seeing with being with death here or being with loss here is like a real invitation to expand our sense of self, our sense of who us is, to kind of like disrupt that like bullshit fantasy sort of like Rambo Americana like zombie apocalypse like thing where people envision being like a last man standing on a land that's been destroyed, like
Yeah.
and yeah, just like instead being like very much more dropped into like a sense of like I want to live and I want to feed life and I want to live a meaningful life and I like want to hold my neighbor's baby and take water to the folks across the street. I want to know people on my block. I want to like link up with a bunch of other humans caring about other humans, and there are so many other folks feeling that same way. It's it's really it's deeply inspiring. And I want to like hold that out too, that like amidst the horrors and the ways that this can become a spectacle for those like especially those who are outside it and only seeing the images on their screens, like um just to know that like there is so much brilliance in our communities, and for those watching like in your communities, like I think this is an inherent human capacity and to function more like organisms in the more than human world, and that being with the death and loss of our times can really invite us to be in the world that way.
Oh, that was incredibly well said and so big and powerful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And I think what feels all of everything you said, I was just like, my soul was nodding and 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 jumping and everything. But I think it also like drew out this truth that I think you're right that that is what humans are, is like we inherently or naturally want to care and connect. And that's said 1,000 times a day, 1,000 different ways and 1,000 different places. But it just kind of reminded me or underscored that we're really conditioned like on in a heavily like in such an intense way um to deprioritize that, to make that like a very, yeah, not the dump, like to just subdue and subvert and repress our nature in order to do other things like make money or be successful or like seem to be in good standing in a civilized world or something. And so I just really appreciate how you put that, what you said. And maybe I'm gonna get to the grief card soon, I mean the death card soon, but I think the animals and the plants are really important here. And I'm curious like what you're noticing about the wildlife around you, and maybe if there's a plant that's like reaching out to you or connecting with you right now that feels like an ally or a friend or a site of hope.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this question. Yeah, I remember in the one of the more like just hours after the most intense part of the storm, maybe even it was very close to some of the most intense parts of the storm. I remember hearing this bird singing, and I was just so struck because I'm also very used to wildlife being quieter during the storms, and that makes a lot of sense as well. But it was so powerful, and I remember how I don't know that much about birds, but I remember someone sharing somewhere with me like how some of the reasons birds sing in the morning is to let each other know let their partner know they survived. And like I don't know if that was specific to a certain species, but the story is so powerful to me, and I didn't really make the connection until right now talking to you, but like hearing them sing and hearing the persistence of life even in like the deeper moments of the storm is just so powerful. And of course, like seeing flowers growing on, uprooted trees, like still reaching towards the sun, like there's like this one tree in our neighborhood in particular I'm thinking of where, like there were flowers growing around those trees' roots before they were uprooted, and now the tree's uprooted and the flowers are still there blooming. I don't know what kind of flowers they are, but they're incredible. It's like, there's, I guess for me, there's like this deep appreciation for all of the life around that is persistent as well amidst all the loss. And, many of the plants and animals who I don't know by name, but like I am deeply paying more attention to or calling out to us, I think. I mean, all the plant friends that I have, I've been feeling especially grateful for. Like, I brought in my potted lemon tree, and there's a volunteer Tulsi also growing up in that pot, and that's, they're inside with me. I brought them in for the storm. They're in a sunny room in my house now, but they've been inside since the storm, and they're happy. But just like having them around, I feel so grateful just to be in their presence. I haven't even made myself any Tulsi tea or anything like that, but just to like be with them. I think, also there's a little fig tree that I brought inside too for the storm, and they have a tiny little fig growing on them. And just like feeling so grateful for the yeah, that and um yeah, like seeing the animals and plants do their thing, like seeing the tree make their fruit, hearing the birds sing their songs, like it's deeply inspiring. And as we try to go about doing what humans do or can do together, to be seeing and witnessing the more than human world in it as well. And um yeah, I'm always grateful for motherwort,
Mm,
for nervous system support, and just kind of like that plant hug. Definitely could be taking more of my motherwort tincture, but just feeling connected to that plant in general is like a huge support for me in my life. And and rose medicine. I think both of those plants really like remind me to go to try to move through the world with a what Joan Halifax calls a soft front and a strong back, you know, and others have used that
mm,
phrase as well, but can always use all those reminders. And I think plants are so good at it, at like modeling ways to be in the world, at like reminding our bodies of ways that we can be in the world, and soothing our nervous systems, even just by being with the beauty of these plants. There was also like some of the rose bushes in my front yard that bloomed like the day after the storm, and I just
wow.
smelling them, you know, just being with them, like
Oh my gosh.
it's just huge medicine, just to notice and like savor these beautiful experiences. Um, yeah, and reminders of like not being alone as a species, and like not
Mm,
having to carry our grief or our experiences alone. I think one thing that I always come back to is like, you know, like humans have never done grief alone or really anything alone as a species.
yeah.
Um, that like the plants have been there all along in our grief rituals and our funerals and our ways of caring for each other, and just also in like us looking around the world for, you know, and our environments for examples of ways to like live and die beautifully. Like plants are doing it all the time. And um, yeah, so I just feel really, really indebted to all of them. Um, yeah, all the
Yeah.
plants around, the nettle in our front yard, the passion flower. Um,
Mm.
yeah, and I think I'm gonna like try to spend some time today, maybe making some herbal formulas and tinctures to like help folks sleep and myself sleep and support our nervous
Mm.
systems. But just to, yeah, just deeply, deeply grateful for all the plants and their magic. Chamomile. I could go on. They're all here.
Good.
They're all needed and they're all amazing.
Yeah. Thank you. I
Yeah.
have to ask about the bears because I know it's common to see black bears in Asheville, and I know that many of them were climbing way, way, way up in the trees in the
Mm.
hours or days before the storm. And I don't know, have you heard bear sightings? I know
Yeah.
that like an entire species doesn't get wiped out in a night, but I'm just
Yeah.
thinking about them. So,
Thank you. Yeah, I have not heard about the bears. I have not seen them. I do, yeah, I thank you for that question, and that's something that I will try to ask around. And um yeah, I don't know. I didn't see, there are bears in our neighborhood often, and I haven't seen them. That doesn't mean they're not there. Um
yeah.
it also could just be like my own scattered focus at this time. So it might
Well,
not
yes,
be.
you're
But I really appreciate you asking, and um, yeah, I will keep an eye out for them, and I can let you know. Yeah,
well,
if I find
give
out.
them if you see one, pass along my love and concern and celebration. And yeah.
Mm, I will.
Um so about the death card,
Yes.
is there, that's often what we start with on the podcast, and sometimes we look at the card
Mm,
together and talk about it, and we're on the phone and not on Zoom. And so I just want maybe is there a version of the death card that feels really most powerful for you, and what does it look like, and what does its imagery kind of teach or remind you about death, both as a part of life and then as like kind of a mm, metaphysical or existential experience we go through repeatedly in our like living experience.
Mm. Thanks. Yeah, I I think like a lot of the images are powerful. The one that's coming to my mind isn't exactly one that I've seen in the death in a tarot deck, but it's like connected to them. So like the image of there's all these different images from like medieval times of like a dance with death, and I've been thinking about that a lot when looking at the death card recently, and just like seeing these different iterations, like seeing death on horseback, death with a scythe, the skeletal figure, like, and coming for all, people of different, people who are wearing like, royal garments, and, people of all different classes, and just kind of coming back to like this art image that I think is really connected to the Death Tarot card, of like this dance macabre, or like dance with death. And yeah, that, to my knowledge, this image like came about during the Black Death and plagues in Europe, but I'm not sure. And I've just felt curious about it. Like, I think in the images, a lot of times, like the figure in the tarot images of the death card, like they can look quite frightening and quite brutal and monstrous in a way. And I'm interested in like this, like, what does it mean to dance with death? Like, and to see these images of like people literally linked arms in a circle dancing with skeletons. Like, what does that mean? Or what might, like, what I think, how to rephrase? I think that I'm interested in how the death card kind of is this monstrous image, and like how that then invites us to think about our relationship with monsters and what scares us, as well as like death, and like maybe how death is kind of made into a monster. And so in all of that, I'm not saying that like death isn't brutal or devastating or terrifying or anything like that. I think it can be. And I found it really interesting. One person, this only happened in one conversation, but someone once was like really upset with me for advocating that folks wear masks, or something around the pandemic, and said that I was like perpetuating a fear of death as a death doula. And I was like, oh, I'm afraid of death. I'm 100% afraid of death. I don't think you have to not be afraid of death to be someone who is turning towards death work. And I think that's important to name. And just to say, and I hope I'm not getting too in the weeds, it feels connected to me. But like, yeah, even with being with my dad's death, and he had hospice and home and was surrounded by loved ones and support, that still looks like a brutal death to me. Like there's a lot about death that is being with a kind of, I think, a brutality in the world. And like the devastation of this hurricane and other disasters around the globe driven by climate chaos, like they are devastating, and like devastation is here. And so I think the death card, though, invites us to meet that devastation, like to meet our monsters, to face what terrifies us, what like pains and truths we've been avoiding, and to get present, like to get uncomfortable, and also to live. So I think the death card offers us a lot, actually, in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I think that's one of the paradoxes of death that overwhelms the human mind or the human capacity to understand is both like it's a natural process. It does seem brutal. We don't know what happens exactly. Um, I think we live better lives when we have what, like you said, a turning towards death or like an awareness and a willingness to be in that discomfort and to face those fears and versus like trying to move through life with this bracing, closed off kind of
Right.
denial, I think, about like the inevitability of death or our vulnerability as mortals. And, yeah, I think like death will come for all of this, but that also doesn't mean that we like need to treat death like nothing because it's equal,
Right.
Um,
Right.
and I think you're reminding me in the Fyodor Pavlov tarot deck, which is newer, and I'll use that when I share about this on Instagram, but there's a naked woman like turned toward the Grim Reaper, kind of like coming in for a kiss. Like it's very almost sexual um and yeah, I think that we get more out of life when we're willing to be intimate with death, whatever that can mean for us, whether it's like being present with someone as they're passing versus like trying to make sure you're not there or you don't have to see it or it's too scary.
Right.
Or, it can mean all kinds of things. But yeah, I love how you describe that and that particular image that you brought forward. And I'm thinking about the Smith Rider-Waite deck where we have the Grim Reaper riding in on the horse, and there's the this like church figure who's kind of trying to like negotiate with death, and then there's this female figure who's kind of like almost like passing out at the fear of like what's coming. There's like I think another person who's just like kind of been it's not funny but sort of dismembered. Like there's a hand popping up, from the soil. And then there's a child who is like sort of innocently looking up at death without any fear. And I was listening to another interview that you gave on a podcast, and I'll link to that one. You also share very beautifully about your experiences with death and how you came into this work. So I recommend people, we didn't focus on that in this conversation, but those stories are really powerful. So I want to send people there too. But what was I going to say? Yeah, in that interview, you talked about the subject of children came up, and I'm thinking about the child in the death card, and it's sort of like because the child hasn't been so indoctrinated or received all of society's programming yet, and because really they're actually kind of closer to death, having come into this new life, that they're able to like have this very different relationship with death than adults are, perhaps. And I'm sort of clumsily making this point, but trying to also ask you about the children who are around you and how they're doing in this moment, and kind of like how they're maybe being teachers for the community too.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So Weaver is the kiddo in my life, the kiddo in the polycule, and she is amazing. I mean, she's 5.5, and yeah, I would say she is finding ways to thrive and like make us laugh and make us have fun all the time. It is incredible, like to watch, her reaction to what's happening. And like we're making an agenda for the day. It's like we're getting water, we're getting fuel, we're trying to, like what kind of mutual aid efforts can we plug into today? And, like Weaver has her hand up and is like, basically, puts on the agenda collective bike ride, and
Aww.
we need that. Like, we need that. The kids are modeling for us, like, not just how do we survive, like how do we live well, like how do we have joy. And Weaver also like opened one of our meetings and led us in a song. I think it's called "I've Got Peace Like a River." If anyone's ever heard that, it has some also some synchronized dance moves that go along with it. And so just like, I mean, it is so powerful. And I also know that a lot of folks are, their networks of childcare like maybe disrupted right now. And so I think like even in our own crew, there's, like, I know that we have to like figure out new ways to distribute and show up and support the parents who we love, and to support Weaver and also the kids on our block. And I know that in my partner's holler where they live, a bunch of folks can't get into work, or the kids aren't going to school right now, and there's been like a road school that's opened up. Like, the parents are taking shifts with all the kids, like 3-hour shifts, and so Weaver's gotten to be a part of that sometimes. And yeah, and like later today, hoping to have the kids across the street come over to do some art, and yeah, to hang with Weaver. And so just to say that, like, I think there's both the ways that kids are incredible teachers of like ways to stay enchanted and in love with life, and be with the bubbling up of emotions, and also find ways to co-regulate with each other. And also like a really big invitation to kind of reconsider the ways that care for children is not, at least in the U.S., really commonly like a village thing. It's like really put onto individual families, and like seeing that kind of being the possibility for that getting cracked open in these times too. And it's like, yeah, no, we actually, like, we're being invited to all be in the particular medicine of being with children right now too. Like, if you don't have a child, or folks who are drawn to that, like there are ways to plug in and support. And I just feel like, yeah, I know like the dream of so many folks to like have an extended community of people who are invested in your kid and like care, and it's not just being biological family. And deep gratitude for biological family too, but just like that is, I see the particular medicine that children are bringing. And if there isn't a kid already in your life, that like these catastrophes also open up like that possibility, like actually like you could be a part of a network of care for children in your neighborhood if you want that. Like, that's something that's needed. And as you're caring for them, you will also be getting schooled on ways to be alive in this world. And you're having a mirror for all your own ways that maybe you are not feeling the most resourced, but also like or most in touch with your inner child, but therefore like an invitation to like to do that. And also like they also I think provide us like a kind of real reason to get grounded in ourselves when we can, and to welcome the different waves of emotion as they come up, and to not problematize them. Like, I think yeah, there's just so much there that we can learn from being with kids. And yeah, just really grateful for the ways that I'm getting to know kids in my neighborhood that I didn't know before this.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to the kids. We made it hard for them, I think. Okay, I have 2 more questions. One is like the big daddy question, and one is just really practical. So I'll start with the big daddy question, and you can also skip it. But I'm curious, because I personally think that for me, having some kind of like working theory around death and what it is, even while like I cannot be sure, I have no
Mhm.
proof. There, it's just like things
Yeah.
I've read, things I've experienced. The only deaths I've been with several of my pets as they
Mm.
passed, and then also I got to be with my grandmother when she passed. And I think I was at a place at that time in my life when I was like actually quite prepared for that. And maybe 5 or 6 years earlier, that would not have been true. I might have like been more avoidant. And so it gave me this really, powerful experience and opportunity to be with her. And
Mm.
yeah, so I think like, I'm just curious what you think happens in death, or what do you think death is, even though we don't know, but you've had experience and you've talked with a lot of people. Do you have like kind of a theory that supports you, or do you like to just sort of like, it's a big ass mystery and I'll find out when I find out kind of thing?
Yeah, I think I feel very like maybe a mixture. Like there's some things I believe, but mostly I feel like, wow, what an incredible mystery. What an incredible, bizarre thing to be alive and to die and have loved ones on the other side of the veil, if you believe that, or, and still have relationships with them and to be open to that. And to not know, but to be able to, yeah, to, let's see, what word am I looking for?
Is it like feel it or sense
Yeah,
it? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. To like to be open to our own intuitive like possibilities, or to like to feel connected to our loved ones who have died. To like feel their presence. I know this doesn't mean that everyone experiences this. I think there's so many different ways to experience it. I feel like with in working with people and connecting with plants as well. Like I think some folks will be like, well, I didn't hear this plant speaking to me, so therefore we're not connected. And like, I just think like there's so many ways to be feeding those connections and like speaking with our ancestors and speaking with our dead that there isn't like a standardized way to do it. So yeah, I just want to hold that up and say that like, I think, like I feel connected to my dad when I am poorly playing the piano and trying to learn because he played the piano, and like that feels to me like this really beautiful way to connect with him because it's something that I know he loved. And like I also sometimes feel his actual presence in the room, but it's not like I clearly see his shape and like walk into the room. Like I think there's so many different ways to be sensing the invisible but like very tangible love that I think continues flowing both ways. And I don't know how or like the mechanisms of any of that. I
Right.
was, yeah, but I do feel like, so yeah, no, I don't have like a theory really, other than I do believe our loved ones are here with us in some mysterious ways. And I don't know how, but I feel it. And I feel like, especially in any like really intense um, experience that I've been in, like I would not have been able to navigate those experiences or like this one now without like feeling the presence of ancestors, both like more than human and human relatives and non blood relatives, just like the presence of all those who have come before us. And like that for me, like one of the ways that I like to drop in when I can is like through singing, through like playing music, and yeah, sitting alone in quotes, like in my room and drinking tea and like feeling the connectedness to a vast mystery beyond us that like I don't ever expect to understand or like know completely, but like can feel held by. Um, yeah, I think, I don't know if this is answering your question, but
Yeah,
yes,
yeah. I mean, yeah,
yes.
it's unanswerable, and that's a beautiful answer. And I appreciate you sharing that.
Mm, yeah.
And yeah, as we wrap up and I let you get back to your day, I would love for you to share how you'd like to invite people to both support your work such that you're able to do it right now, and then also places people can send their support for you and your community.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so as far as supporting efforts here, there are so many. One organization that folks could donate to is Beloved Asheville, and you can Venmo them at beloved-asheville. Their PayPal is also beloved Asheville, no dash. Um, and I can send you those links so that you have them. There are also so many other organizations. I've been collecting donations through Venmo and kind of just like spreading them around to like some of our own efforts in our neighborhood, but then also like any extra I've been just distributing to the different various mutual aid stuff happening around us and happening in different communities. So if anyone's feeling overwhelmed by choosing an organization, you can also Venmo me at Mara-Pfeffer. And yeah, I'll just be distributing those funds to either efforts that we're doing to get folks food and water and composting toilets and things like that, or and gas, or I'll just be giving them directly to many of the organizations on the ground here. But Beloved Asheville is one you could directly donate to, and they've been providing folks with meals as well as like going out and doing different kinds of active search and yeah, getting folks connected to resources. Yeah, so they're just doing all kinds of on the ground stuff, hiking into communities that need resources. They're just incredibly badass and doing an amazing job. So that's Beloved Asheville.
Okay.
And yeah, and then I guess like ways to support my work. There's, on my website you can sign up at www.motherwortandrose.com. You can either sign up for my newsletter there. You can also sign up on my Substack which is Grief Spells, and I can provide that link too. And of course, paid subscriptions are always helpful. I'm also teaching an online class that is self-paced, and you can join at any time, and it's a year-round course called Grief Magic. And I am still putting out materials for that. And yeah, and that course is really an invitation to like be with our bioregions and the grief that we may be experiencing, and to understand and tend to our grief as like creative practice, to sort of be with like the folklore of the different seasons and draw inspiration from the more than human world and the stories that we tell about it. And so that class you can also sign up for if you would like. But yeah, I would definitely just encourage folks to try to connect by just at least signing up for to stay in touch like outside of Instagram via newsletter is great to kind of dodge the algorithm, and also like if you do have funds to please direct them towards mutual aid efforts, and yeah, just super grateful for that.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, please. You are a beautiful, amazing writer, and so I also want to direct folks to your written work on Substack, and that also seems like a beautiful way to support you. And a lot of my work emphasizes creativity and mysticism, and we didn't get to explore the creativity side. So I just want to encourage folks to go into your ecosystem where you're sharing really beautiful things about how creativity can emerge in the wake of grief and how we can connect with that as a way to live and to honor our dead too. So I want to thank you deeply, deeply, and in as big a way as I can for having this conversation at this time and taking yourself to the Whole Foods. I'm sure you have other things you're doing around there, but I know you have a lot going on and a lot that you're feeling and processing and a lot of space that you're holding for people. So thank you for sharing in this, vulnerable, strange moment. And thank you so much for the work that you do to help us navigate death and be with light.
Thank you so much for having me, and being a part of my ecosystem of support. And it's been really, really resourcing actually to get to come and reflect with you, and so grateful. So thank you so much.
We'll be sending you love and strength and courage and creativity, and I'll be reading and following along, and I hope others will too. So yes, take good care and know that we're thinking about you.
Thank you so much, Cicely.
I'm so grateful to Mara June for coming on the show, particularly at this time. A couple days after recording the interview, I heard from Mara again, and they mentioned they had seen a bear. So I thought that was hopeful, good news. Of course, I care deeply about the humans affected by these big disasters, but sometimes, actually, often we overlook how the wildlife, how our animal and non-human kin are impacted. So if you were thinking about the bears too, I wanted to share that with you. It also seems important in a conversation around death, though we didn't get into it deeply, but I do want to acknowledge we have also just marked a year since the genocide in Palestine began through the military assault of Israel by Israel, backed by the United States, and the anniversary of a terrorist attack in Israel that killed many people and left many families waiting for their loved ones who were taken hostage. So I feel like all of this is connected. We're living in this moment where we can see mass murder happening by a state far away from us. We can see it in our phones, we can see it on our televisions. We know that our tax dollars are funding this destruction, which is not only creating suffering that's impossible to imagine for humans, but also destroying habitats, environments, polluting the land, polluting the water. All of this is connected, and I think all of us are needed in terms of doing what we can to try and create a world, a way of being that is more life affirming in the face of all this death. How can we fight for life? So it's a big question, but one I hope we can explore in our own communities and continue to explore here together. I've included in the show notes places you can connect with Mara's work. You'll find their Instagram, website, and Substack. I highly recommend you subscribe to Mara's Substack. And if you can, become a paid subscriber, send some support for a little while. And I've also included links to some of the places you can donate to folks who are needing help in the wake of Hurricane Helene. As I see more mutual aid organizations calling for help in Florida in the aftermath of Milton, I will add those as well. And I've also included in the show notes a bunch of climate action Instagram accounts that I follow. And I just want to invite folks to continue to raise your awareness around how the climate is changing on the planet, the impacts it's having not just near you, but also how it's impacting people very far away from you, and how we are all, again, connected in this experience. So if you're interested in allowing yourself to be more aware of what's going on, I invite you to follow some of those accounts if you use Instagram or get on their email lists. And there's also a link to Climate Change Makers, which is a organization that hosts a number of events where you can log on Zoom, and they've got a action prepared, and everyone takes their action together from wherever they are over the course of that Zoom call. So it's a way to take this feeling we have, this despair and sadness we have over the loss of our ecosystems and natural resources, and turn it into meaningful action. So if you're there, if you're ready, we need you. I'll be joining you too. So thank you so much for listening. If you're here, if you made it through this episode, it tells me you have a big, beautiful, tender heart and a lot of love to share with the people around you and with the world at large. So hold on to that. It's powerful, it's important. Don't let people tell you it's soft or silly. It's how we're going to survive. So thank you. Until next time, I am wishing you a creative and magical life. Keep nourishing, fighting for, celebrating your creativity and your magic. And I'll be back with you soon. Take care.